Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on episode 8 of the Sheroes Project. I'm Anika Iyer, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's Shero, Shana Bryant. Shana is a senior producer and a level 15 industry veteran who has successfully completed the Capcom, Midway Games, and Electronic Arts quests. She has worked on creating some of your favorite games in the Devil May Cry and Resident Evil series, and she's brought her depth of expertise from console to PC to augmented and mixed reality experiences and mobile. She's currently producing a new round of amazing, not yet announced coolness at Take-Two Interactive in Seattle, where she is right now. And Shanae speaks openly about her experiences as a woman of color in the games industry and is a passionate advocate of diversity and inclusion. She has led workshops on designing inclusive interactions for emerging tech at the Grace Hopper Conference and has spoken on the topic of career management for underrepresented professionals. And to add to her awesomeness, she is also an avid comic artist, and you can check out her work at terribleallies.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shanae.
Of course, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I would love to start at the beginning of your journey into tech, talking a little bit about how you first became working in the games industry specifically, and also what continues to excite you about this space today.
Yeah, oh wow, totally. So how did I first get in the game industry? I've been a gamer since I was a kid, essentially. Like I've been playing games since I was like 4 or 5 years old. I have a twin sister who also plays games. We used to sit down, like me, my sister, and my dad. We're a gaming family. We'd sit down, we'd play games back on the NES, Castlevania, Ninja Gaiden, all this stuff like way back in the day. And I remember I had a distinct memory as a kid where I was probably like 9 or 10 years old, and I said, oh, man, I love this stuff. I want to make these games. How do people even make games? What is this? This is like some kind of magic or something. And yeah, I started on my path saying like, I know that somebody out there makes money making these things. This is a real job for somebody. And I started on my path to try and get into the game industry. And this was back in the day before they had game design degree programs. So I did what everyone who wanted to make games back then did. It's like I decided I need to learn how to code. So I went to college for computer science. I was learning coding. I was learning C and C++ and all these different stuff. And I figured my senior year of college, I said, you know what? I hate coding. It's so not for me. But it was like senior year, so I went ahead and I got my degree. A little bit after that, I actually wound up starting at my first job in the industry. I started as a quality assurance tester at Electronic Arts, and lo and behold, even though I wasn't writing code, having that computer science background was super beneficial for me, because I understood the way that systems interact as well. So that wasn't a bad idea. That was actually a pretty good idea, even though I don't write code on the daily basis. So I've been in the industry for about 15 years since then. Worked at I started out Electronic Arts, Midway Games, did 4.5 years at Capcom, did mobile. I was at Microsoft working on HoloLens, like you talked about earlier. Yeah, now I'm at Take-Two Interactive, working back on games proper, like not doing just experiences for base computers, doing games. And you asked the question, what continues to excite me? I can nerd out about this forever. Like I love working on video games. I think that it is a unique genre of entertainment. When you look at like movies and books and literature and all this other kind of stuff, it's also very, very young. Games we're 30, 40 years old. And I've seen games evolve as I've also grown up like in the industry. And I think that we've got a long way to go. And I think it's exciting for me.
Yeah, no, it's always nice even when you figure out you might have wished you had done something differently, it all works out so nicely in the end. But no, that's awesome to hear. That's a really unique twist, I think, from what you studied to what you're doing now.
It was a lucky break.
Through all these technical projects that you've worked on, from even projects you worked on in school to projects you worked on at Electronic Arts to HoloLens, what you're doing now, what stands out as one of your favorite technical projects?
Oh, one of my favorite technical projects. So my favorite project will probably be very different than my favorite technical project. My favorite technical project, I'm probably going to go back to, and we talk about Microsoft just a little bit. So when I went to go work at Microsoft, it was specifically because I was at a point in my career where AR and VR were becoming really exciting, and most of my colleagues were really getting interested in the AR VR space. This is brand new technology that doesn't exist anymore, or that didn't exist yet, I should say rather. And so, yeah, I also got I bit with the bug and I got really interested and excited in augmented reality. And so I took a job I moved up to Seattle and I took a job at Xbox working on the Microsoft HoloLens. Awesome. So if you guys aren't familiar with the HoloLens, it is a head-mounted device that allows you to view, create, manipulate holograms. And it's just kind of as magical as it sounds. One of the things that throughout software development, one of the things that has been sort of I take solace in when I work with teams is I say, hey, guys, I know we've got this problem. Don't worry, this problem, someone somewhere in the world has solved this problem before, right? It's this is not a problem that's unique to us and our team. And then suddenly I'm working on holograms, and we've got problems that no one's ever solved before. Just it's brand new. It's nothing. There's no playbook to reference, and that was wow, that was a challenge. That was super exciting and also terrifying in a way. And I worked at a few different experiences when I was at Microsoft and the HoloLens. Probably one that was most exciting I like talking about it is experience called Destination Mars, and this was a project that we worked with NASA JPL, and the whole idea was essentially we recreated the surface of Mars with holograms. And when I say recreated, I don't mean I got an artist to sit down and create polygonal recreation. We actually pulled down actual images from the Mars rover, on the surface of Mars from Curiosity, and had to figure out how do you use that data to translate that into the actual terrain and landscape. That was a huge technical undertaking as well. And I work, working at Microsoft, I work with some of the smartest, most brilliant people on the planet. But even they were challenged with stuff like this. It's how do you even make this happen? But one of the interesting things about that project as well, it wasn't a game per se. We call it an experience, right? It was that's the terminology we use for those sorts of things on the HoloLens. And all the folks who are working on this project, we're all ex-game developers. We're all game developers, essentially. So it was interesting to work on a project that this is not a game. This is actually something it's educational. It's actually, I don't know if it's still there or not, but the Destination Mars experience became an installation at the Kennedy Space Center for a period of at least 8 to 10 months or so, which is super freaking cool, by the way. I'm wow, that's neat. There was a little bit of I won't say clash, but we had to go back and forth with NASA about a couple of things. So for example, as a game developer, we look at stuff and we're just okay, if that looks cool, then it gets in the game, right? Because we want something cool, exciting, emotional, that kind of thing. But NASA, they're looking at it saying this needs to be educational. So we had to find the balance between those two things. And sometimes that was a little bit harrowing. The one that I like to draw attention to is at the very end of the experience, we flash forward, you're on the surface of Mars, and we put all these we were imagine the future of Mars. We put all these settlements on the surface of the planet, and then you see at the very end a rocket ship takes off, and it goes into the stratosphere, and you follow it up with the eye line, and then you look back down, everything's faded out, and it says Destination Mars, and that's amazing. So this rocket ship, we had these 4 emitters that were coming out shooting fire, and it was spinning as it was going up, and it had this beautiful spiral effect, and we're this looks amazing, and NASA said no. That is not realistic. The centrifugal force would probably kill everyone on board. That doesn't make any sense. And we're but it looks cool, and they're but it doesn't make sense. So that was an interesting experience as well, making sure that we could find, I don't want to say the middle ground, but understanding where they were coming from and where we were coming from, and how do we apply our gaming knowledge to making sure that we were, also being really accurate to the science. Because obviously NASA cares about science.
I mean, even the clash sounds exciting, being able to think about those kind of things. So just from even a few minutes of hearing you talk about your background as a game developer, it sounds like an incredible way to utilize a technical background. But unfortunately, there is such a small number of women game developers today. And while the video games industry has been rapidly growing and the number of women playing games has also been growing, the number of women game developers is still so low.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on why that is, and do your experiences point you to any insights about that?
Yeah, that's a very complex, complex question, a very complex answer to that. And I would say, you know, if I had to summarize, there's no one particular thing, essentially, that like contributes to this the issue in the game industry, and it's not just an issue in the game industry; it's an issue in tech at whole, it's an issue in society at whole, right? So just to make it much bigger, right? But if we just talk about the game industry specifically, I would probably, let's just like boil it down to like three. I put things in three different buckets, right? There's the front of the pipeline, like hiring, which people talk about all the time, and I'm very excited to talk about. Companies oftentimes, when they talk about diversity and inclusion, they focus on hiring, getting more people in the door. There's also, though, the rest of the pipeline. It's not just hiring, it's also, once you get people in the door, how do you keep them there? And that's a much harder problem to solve, and companies don't like that one because it's not a very easy metric to put on a PowerPoint slide somewhere. And then I would say the last thing is probably, the last and the most difficult thing is culture. Like really understanding the environment in which people work and that sort of thing. So when we talk about the front of the pipeline, like I mentioned, companies like to focus on the front of the pipeline because it's very concrete, right? It's the idea that, well, we just need to get more women, more people of color, more people from marginalized groups interviewing and getting them hired. And it's like, cool. So they focus on that because that's really easy to say, hey, we had this number of people that we brought into the company. But at the same time, when you look at the data, when you look at the charts, even though there's been an increased attention and awareness on the fact that we've been getting more people in the pipeline, the number of women specifically that have stayed in the industry is flatlined, and that means that we are losing women at a rate faster than what we can hire them. So what does that say, right? That means that that problem is not just getting more women in the pipeline. That is a problem. That is a challenge that we have yet to solve. And a lot of companies like to say, oh, well, you know, we couldn't hire women because no women applied. Well, I look at that and say, well, like if women didn't apply based on the way that your current hiring process works, you need to change your process. Like if this is something that's really important to you as a company to build a team that's diverse and inclusive, you can't just kick the problem down the road. You can't just say, oh, well, sorry, we wanted more women, but they didn't apply. Sorry, we wanted more people of color, but they didn't apply. Well, you have to go to where they are. Women know women, people of color know people of color. Start there. At the same time, once you get people in the door, a lot of times companies like to think that, well, you know, we sprinkled a little bit of diversity on this team, so I'm sure it fixed all our problems. And they learn really quickly that's not the case at all. It's a matter of understanding the unique challenges that people who come from marginalized groups experience within this industry. There's lots of companies that do unconscious bias training and diversity and inclusion training. I think there's value to those as well. But honestly, like there's a lot of education that goes all around for this. It's not at all a simple problem. It's not just adding a woman to a team that has been overwhelmingly male for X number of years. You will fail with that approach. And just as an aside, like I could probably, I actually have a talk about building teams that talks about like, you know, how do you build, I say diverse teams, but I don't even use the word diverse. I just say building teams because teams inherently should be diverse. It's something we should think about because that's how you, like, building good teams includes diversity, includes inclusion. And I can talk about this for an hour, which is probably far more time than we have right now, but happy to circle back around to it a little bit more later.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that.
Of course.
I'd like to now open up the floor to our interactive participants for some live Q&A. So you guys can also take it away with any questions you might have.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
I guess I'll go first. How are you? Hearing about this whole path that you've taken, like all the way from being a small child playing video games to things you've accomplished right now. So as someone who's kind of had this constant thread, this passion, like through a lot of the different jobs that you've taken, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that you had as you kind of navigated through the different opportunities that you had, and what was most important to you as you like stayed in this industry but like switched between activities?
Yeah, totally. When I started in the industry, like I said, I knew I wanted to get in the industry. I clearly I didn't know I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in the industry until I really got into it. And like I said, this was 15 years ago. The game industry was very different back then than it is now. There's a lot more resources. There's social media. There's all kinds of ways that you can learn about the process of making games. Back then, we didn't have that stuff. But so avail yourselves of it is what I'm saying. So when I took the job at Electronic Arts as a QA tester, one of the great things of having that job was that it allowed me to learn a lot more about like what are the individual roles and disciplines that exist in the game industry. So it's not just designer and engineer. It's like designer, engineer, QA, production, finance, marketing. There's a wide variety of people it takes to actually make a game. So just understanding a little bit more about the game development process helped direct me in terms of what things I was really excited about. So whereas when I first went into the industry, I said, oh, I want to be a designer because, you know, everybody wants to be a designer. Like I started to understand, well, I really enjoy design, but I'm seeing where my skills actually lie might be in this other area within management. What I do is, do you guys know what producer is, by the way, or what a producer sort of does? It's a little different company to company, but like the way I describe it is like, you know, my job is like, I typically have like a higher purview, higher view of what the project is. I work with my designers, my artists, my engineers, QA folks, and like my job is to make sure they can do their jobs. My job is to remove roadblocks. I also own like the budget and the schedule, and like ultimately if the game doesn't come out the door, it's my fault. But but you know, ultimately my job is facilitating conversations, making sure that work is happening. If work's not happening, like helping to make sure, like how do we remove roadblocks? How do we make sure that things get done? How do we make sure that the project is always constantly moving forward? And as I started to learn a little bit more about the game development process and the different roles, I started to just sort of amend like the direction I was going. So at EA, I was a QA tester. I moved into management. I saw an opportunity over at Midway Games that had this new role called technical standards engineer, and it was a role that branched quality assurance and production. And what I really wanted to do was production. That's what I was learning. And so I wound up moving cross country because I said, that sounds like that's a great opportunity. I'm still not working on quite the types of games I want to work at and I work on, and honestly, I still had this dream that I wanted to work for Nintendo one day. But it got me a little bit closer, and it also got me on the West Coast, which for game development, there's a lot more opportunities for you, like if you're out on the West Coast, because that's just where all the tech companies are. And working at Midway, which is a fantastic company, and I do miss it dearly. That opened up some opportunities that opened the door to give me the job at Capcom. I made some great connections with people. It was, and that was where I took my first position in production was at Capcom. I did the whole stereotypical. I know people were just like, oh, you know, whatever, like the 5-year plan, like 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan. It doesn't have to be that concrete, but I did have a set of goals that were like short-term, mid-term, long-term goals that I've always kind of kept in my head and have helped move me along the way. When I left Capcom, it was because I wanted to learn a little bit more about mobile game development, metrics and analysis. And so I moved into mobile games for a couple of years so that I could get some real concrete understanding and knowledge and like actual working experience of that. When I went to Microsoft, it was because AR, VR was a brand new technology. And I said, I would really love to be in on the ground floor. You know, it sounds dorky, but I really wanted to learn that. And ultimately wanted to bring all that stuff back to console game development, because console game development is kind of this is my home.
Hello. So
Hey.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
It seems like you have so many interests and passions and things you like in terms of art, game development, like some hardware, software kind of mix in there. How throughout your life have you prioritized your time and known how to balance that? Because I mean, even in college, a lot of us struggle with that. Like, how have you done that throughout your path?
Oh, wow. That's hard. That's a really hard question. This is something that I'll be honest, I struggle with this just a little bit. I have, like you said, I have a wide variety of passions. Like I do art, I do writing, I do I play games, I play drums. I've actually got like a wide variety. I tell people I have too many hobbies, which I think is true. But so the way that it has worked for me, and this is just something for me. Like I have friends who keep like these whole like social calendars and like I spend 3 days doing this and then I do like that works for them. I've tried that. That doesn't work for me specifically. But what I wind up doing is I actually I have like I don't have a calendar like that, but I have like a set of like 2017 goals. I have things that I want to achieve, things I want to focus on. So this year I really wanted to focus on my art and to help encourage myself and force myself to work on that art. I signed up for an art convention, which actually was just this past Saturday. And then that forced me to focus on that, to make that a priority. I've also had some opportunities to do some more speaking. I like getting out here. I like speaking to people as well. So I've also I put those as goals for myself for 2017. I'm actually currently in the works of thinking of what my 2018 plan could be. And I want to continue with my art, and I think I want to do some more speaking opportunities, and I've at least have one opportunity to write a book chapter as well. So those are the things that work well for me, is to come up with these broad goals. And that doesn't mean that I don't engage in like the other things that are creatively inspiring for me. But one of the things I've found, I think this is actually kind of true of all humans. Humans are bad at multitasking. Like some people are better at it than others, or they're better at context switching, switching your brain from one thing to another. But in general, the human brain is not great at multitasking. And as you get older, it gets worse at multitasking. So that's what's worked for me, is to be able to say, okay, I've got these particular goals. Let me focus on this for a bit. So I've been doing the art for like the last 2 months. And now that I've gotten past that, I'm switching to do a little bit more of the writing for the rest of the year.
Awesome. Does anyone else?
I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if she had more questions. I guess like you've always seemed to have a passion and like a plan, and that's obviously quite nice. But do you have any advice for people who like love like certain things but don't have a specific passion or like certain career path that they know they want to go into?
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting for me, so I wanted to be in game development. I had no idea how to actually do it. And I can say from one of the things that's been really interesting about working in this industry in specific is that we have people that got here from all different paths. Like I probably took the most traditional path to get into game development. I was like, oh, I want to do things that are technical. I should go to college for technical stuff and then go, I was very methodical about it. One of my supervisors at Capcom, he had an art history degree. One of my associate producers was a former social worker. They came from all different walks of life, all different paths. One of the things that I think is always just interesting, and I've struggled with this myself over the years, where as I've tried to decide where I want to go next, or how does my career path sort of change, because I do update those short, midterm, and long-term goals. One of the things that's been difficult for me is I look at it and say, oh, I take a job, if something doesn't click, I'm like, did I make a mistake? Was this a bad idea? Do I really know what I'm doing with my life? The great thing is there's really no wrong decision with this stuff. That is a hard lesson to learn. It's a hard lesson I've learned as well. Because ultimately, it's like if you take a job and you're just like, I do not like, and you put some effort into it, and you're like, you really are just like, this is not the right fit for me. There's nobody who's going to like chain your foot to the desk and say that, no, sorry, you made this decision. You're stuck with it for the rest of your life. That's one of the great things that's just true about the stage of your life. The best way I've heard it worded, especially because in the tech industry, one of the things that we struggle with is, I don't know if you guys have heard, there's work-life balance issues in the tech industry. And we've gotten better, I think, is a nice way of wording it, but we still got a long way to go. And I'm totally going to steal this from somebody else. I'm not going to attribute it properly because I don't know who originally said it, but it really resonated with me. This person talked about if you imagine the things that are important in your life, like your friends, your family, your job, your health, that kind of stuff, you imagine those as like balls that you're juggling. And it said all of those balls you're juggling are glass balls, except for work. Like that's the one that, well, if you can drop that one, it will always come back. That has always resonated with me because it reminds me, even though sometimes when we're in these jobs, that it feels like, oh my gosh, like the weight of the world is on my shoulders, especially for women in these industries that are overwhelmingly male, and for people of color, the industries that are overwhelmingly white. We think to ourselves, oh my gosh, not only the weight of the world, but the weight of all of the world, like all of Black people's hopes and dreams and women's hopes and dreams are on my shoulders specifically. And that can be really, really stressful, and that can be really hard. But like I said, like ultimately, like, you know, this is the thing I say to myself, and we've said it internally here quite a few times, we're just making video games, guys, you know? Like ultimately what it means is, you know, you can make a decision, and if it doesn't work out, you can make a different decision. You know, I don't know, does that answer your question? Does it come close to answering your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Like, it's something I struggle with still. So, thank you.
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Tara. I had a question about just like your mentors. So like who's been the most influential person or biggest mentor in terms of like your passion for advocacy in diversity and inclusion, or passion for gaming and like continuing in that industry, and like what specifically about them has stuck with you today? Oh,
that's a great question. I have a lot of mentors in the space, and I'm glad that you brought up the question of mentors, because I think that is, you know, having been in the industry 15 years, when I first got in the industry, I did not understand the concept of mentors. I didn't understand the value of mentors, and now, much later in my career, I'm like, man, I wish I'd known this stuff way back. That would have been. It's critical. It's like in my last 5 years in the industry, having had people who can act as mentors, who can act as sponsors, who can act as uplifters, because I think there's subcategories of mentorship, has been critical towards like my success and towards my continued growth and keeping me in the industry. Are the folks that I don't have like famous mentors or anything like that. I have people that I admire, but most of the folks that I've chose as mentors, some of whom don't even know they're my mentors. Yeah, most of those folks they're people who fall into a certain set of categories, right? There are people who I have a set of mentors who I know will tell me the truth no matter what, even when it hurts. Sometimes that's really important. I have sets of mentors who are outside of my chain of command, like I don't work for them. I think that's oftentimes really important as well, because sometimes one of the things that you want to talk with your mentors about is your career growth. It is your career path, right? And oftentimes you don't want that conflict of interest. I have people who I would consider to be sponsors, people who know my work very well and can help uplift me and help advocate for me within other spaces. But specifically in diversity and inclusion, it's interesting because I've got the game development and game production, and then I also have a set of folks or a set of focus within diversity and inclusion. I sort of mix those two things together because I think they're both very important, and I've been also trying to help push as much as we can within the game industry for us to make changes that are really necessary. But yeah, I also have mentors within diversity and inclusion who are people who not only check me and make sure that I'm always being thoughtful about the things that I'm saying, but also are people that I can learn from, I can grow from. You know, I speak a lot about diversity and inclusion from the perspective and identity as a Black woman. But over the past few years, like I got involved in affinity groups and other communities, such as when I was at Microsoft, I worked in the Gaming for Everyone group. I volunteered in the Gaming for Everyone group, and I went to Blacks at Xbox. I think those kinds of groups are really important because finding that community it's key for first of all making sure you don't feel like a crazy person when you're experiencing things in the industry, but it's also key because you start to understand the very unique struggles that people have in this industry based off of their very different identities. So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have like a specific. I have a list of names of people in my head. It's like that, but they're all they're people I've worked with over the years. So I'm not sure that they would. I'm not sure if I named individual people that it would make much sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. Just hearing what people are like, the different areas of your life that people are mentoring you in. This is good.
Yeah, I think that everyone should get a mentor. I think that is one of the things that has kept me in the industry this long. I have 2 mentees as well, who are people who who have a lot of potential and stuff like that, and they're just fantastic women who've had struggles in this industry. And like one of the great things is being able to, like I said, you have to find the right person for you, right? And oftentimes, like I said, I mentioned I've got some mentees or some mentors who don't necessarily know they're my mentor, because a lot of times with the thing I had to learn about getting a mentor is you don't necessarily walk up and say, "Hey, can you mentor me?" Like that scares people off a lot. Some people want that, but some people get absolutely terrified by that. So instead, it's like the way I approach it is if I find someone who I think I can learn something from, and it doesn't have to be like we're a mentor, mentee, you have to meet once a month for an hour. I just say, hey, would you mind grabbing coffee? Like, I think you've got some really interesting insights about blah, blah, blah. And I'd really love to buy you a coffee. And, most people won't say no. And like, if you do that, like, once every 6 months or something like that, you can have your secret mentor. Yeah, that has been, that's been great for me.
Cool. Do we have time for one more question, Nika? Or okay. Cool.
Yes. Sorry, I'm still here for however long.
No. I just wanted to double check the time. But yeah, I was wondering if you could kind of talk about I guess in school, very much like perfectionist, like there's like a goal and you have to like meet all the criteria, but sometimes in industry you kind of have to, sorry, can you hear me? Have to balance, you have to balance kind of like what you push to production, but also it's maybe not like perfect. And how do you balance that and kind of accept kind of what you can do versus what you want to do, and kind of putting that in the industry?
Oh, I love this question. I can get very producer nerdy about this particular question in general. This is something that we struggle with, especially in creative industries. I'm sure that for everyone who's played or who's been following games has there's plenty of games that ship that shouldn't have shipped. There's plenty of games that should have shipped that didn't ship. And a lot of it has to do with our inability to know when to call something done. I actually have this thing called the Done Manifesto that you can do a Google search for. I print it out. I have it hanging at my desk, like at every place I've worked at, and just like it's a list of I think 10 to 13 rules that are just talking about how do you get stuff done. And ultimately the guide behind it is like there's a few of them that talk about like. Done is better than perfect is the one that you hear most famously, right? I think Zuckerberg said it at some point, and so everyone attributes to him. But it's a pretty it's a pretty common thing. And it's like perfection does get in the way of getting things done. You don't get things done so that you can be done. You get things done so that you can start other things. I think is one of the other ones that are on the list. It is a balance that is really difficult especially for people with, like I said, with creative backgrounds and who are in creative industries to strike. And that's honestly, that's part of the beauty of actually having all these different disciplines within, like, say, the game industry. Like I have designers, and I don't own the creative vision on my products. My designer owns the creative vision on the products. I own a small portion, but I help support that. And same thing for the business vision. I have biz dev folks who own the business vision. I help support that. But ultimately, like, my job is to balance between those two things because I own the schedule and ultimately the budget and trying to get these things out the door. So, like, it's great to have someone else to bounce to keep you accountable, keep you honest. I'm usually that person that gets to keep people honest. And I've had to have the hard conversation with people sometimes where I'm like, hey guys, I know this feature that we absolutely love. We have to cut this so we can ship this game. But it'll be great because we'll ship this game and we can put that in the sequel.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So our episode is coming to an end, even though I'm sure we'd all love to talk to Shanae for much longer. Thank you again, Shanae, for joining us today. And also thanks to all of our interactive members for tuning in and for all of your thoughtful questions. A recording of this interview will be posted shortly on the Sheroes website and also on our YouTube channel. So please do forward it to others who you think might be interested and spread the word about the project. We'd love to have new participants on each episode. And if you know a Shero that we should include in a future episode, please nominate them through the website at sherosproject.com. And finally, before we end, I'm excited to announce our next episode is coming up in just 3 weeks, featuring Karen Catlin, who is an author, a speaker, a coach, and an advocate for women in tech. And this episode will air at 6 p.m. EST on November 30th. So mark your calendars. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and Shanae for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.